Hey everybody, we are now almost back to the beginning, doing 2015 2016 standard character releases, ranking them from best to worst. I'm doing 2015 in with 2016 just because there aren't many characters that got added to the game in 2015 after launch. The game launched in November 2015, and there was just 5 characters in December 2016. There's also no ships in this video because ships came out at the end of 2016. Maybe I'll do a video ranking all the beginning ships that came out in that first batch. But after this video, I hope to rank all day 1 characters, which is 65. So that'll be a little bit longer. But let's get into it. Let's see who is the best to come out in between 2015 and 2016. And right around the release of Force Awakens, we got a batch of First Order and Resistance characters. And I'm starting with Captain Phasma. Captain Phasma for me is mid B tier. And if you see, I got 2 B tiers here. That's because this set of characters is very B tier heavy and very A tier, S tier light. So I need to expand that space. But Captain Phasma is pretty solid with her Omicron. Without the Omicron, she'd fall probably C tier at best. But she does great in territory wars. And Conquest, she's basically just useful for her turn meter gain. And with her new level 9 Datacron, she might see more use for a few months. Might even be worth taking her to R7. But she's okay, not much damage output to speak of. She was a good leader at the beginning, a plug-and-play leader when anything went in the game as far as team compositions, because she lets you call extra team members to assist. But now she's basically only used as a lead in territory war. Next up we got Finn, and I think Finn is very low B tier. He is part of a ship that's pretty good in the Resistance fleet, but it's not a good fleet. What I really like him for is his leadership, especially in 3v3. You put him with the Resistance Hero Bros or the Handbag Bros or whatever, and they do a lot of damage. His leadership gives 60% offense, defense, and potency, which is insane for just a static boost. He can cleanse his team, he can taunt, he can heal up a little bit. Not much damage on his own, but the fact that he's a tank is pretty useful. It's nice sometimes just to throw him on a Galactic Legend Raid team to take some hits, so low B tier for him. Next we got First Order Officer, and he comes in at the lower mid B tier, mainly because of his ship. The TIE Echelon allows the First Order fleet to beat the Executrix, no, not Executrix, Executor, and otherwise he's just kind of like a simple role player on a Supreme Leader Kylo team. He passes off 100% turn meter to Supreme Leader Kylo most of the time. He can refresh the cooldowns of his team if he crits with his second special. He doesn't do much damage, so in the ground game he doesn't do that much, but he does have a decent ship, so he gets a little bit higher. Next up we got Kylo Ren, who is also a decent pilot, but he's one of 3 pilots on the command shuttle, along with Phasma and I think First Order Stormtrooper. He's okay, you know, he can take a lot of hits because he has stacking defense, but he doesn't have much damage output. His AoE is kind of nice on a non-Supreme Leader Kylo team because you grant turn meter. He can get retribution. He was decent at the beginning of the game, but right now he's not that strong, so he doesn't have as much of a place. Next up we got his counterpart, original Rey, Stick Rey, and she's high C tier as well for the current game. But when the game first came out, she was kind of a powerhouse just because of her pure damage and her foresight. It just made her so hard to hit. She did double hit. She does double hit. She does triple hit. She gets offense up. Foresight. That stick hit harder than any lightsaber in the game pretty much when the game started. So she was pretty insane. I actually played the game a few months when it came out and before I quit. And part of the reason I quit was I had Rey 4-star and I didn't see any way to improve her because she was only in the Chromium packs and I kept buying them because I was a noob. And they never yielded anything I wanted, so eventually I quit. Next up we're going to go to an S tier character, and that is General Grievous. So General Grievous was a Shard Shop exclusive that kind of made the Shard Shop, and he was the key feature at the beginning. You could buy Grievous shards with Shard Shop currency, and it was insanely expensive, thousands of Shard Shop currency for just a couple shards. Back at a time when you weren't overflowing with 7-star characters. But right now in the game, as far as a marquee level character, he's S tier for sure. He's not as much of a powerhouse as he was right when like Gear 13 and Relics came out. but he's a monster on his own, just taking bonus turns all the time. Preventing counterattacks, good leadership, damage based on health. So in the current Datacron set, he could probably start hitting like a truck if you get enough health bonuses. Unavoidable attacks, or his AoE is unavoidable. He can stun, he inflicts healing immunity, target lock, just does a lot. And not to mention, he is the fleet commander for the Malevolence, one of the better ships in the game, one of the key ships for off-meta counters to Profundity and Executor. Next up, we got another S tier, and that's Captain Rex. So I debated putting him in A tier. He does seem like more of an A tier character, but as a marquee, I mainly bumped him up to S tier because of his PvE viability. He is a great character in raids for a young account. Even at low gear, as long as you have a strong 5s, him under Shock T and with the other 501st clones, they can do millions of damage in the Sith raid, which is awesome for early game players if you don't have Galactic Legends. He's a great leader in Conquest because of that turn meter gain just from being hit. He gets his team going, he gives tons of extra speed to the 501st, and he throws out a turn meter with his first special. His basic's okay, he can reduce some turn meter. But his big thing is that aerial advantage, which just stacks forever and turns into an insta-kill for any character that doesn't have Galactic Legend properties or Kylo Ren and Master properties.
Hello there.
Like and subscribe.
Next up, we're moving on to some less than stellar characters, starting with Magma Trooper at high D tier. We're in about March 2016 right now. Magma Trooper doesn't have much going on for him. He can work under Iden team. He gets tons of turn meter just from resisting a debuff the first time each turn. And he can remove turn meter from the opponent with his AoE, so he's decent there, but he's just D tier because he's a support character on a team where he's not a main feature of that team, if that makes sense. Next we got Chief Chirpa. You know, a leader as a Zeta because of the C-3PO event, but he's a gear 9 because Ewoks aren't very useful. He gets D tier over F tier because he is the leader, he makes the team work. He does have Omicron, so you could bump him up higher. Probably should have, but I have never used it, and I don't know much about it. I probably wouldn't apply that anytime soon unless Ewoks started being required for something else. Next up we got Tusken Shaman, and Shaman sits in F tier because he's a Tusken. Tuskens are the worst faction in the game, in my opinion. Probably most of yours as well. But he doesn't have much use. He can like revive a Tusken, but sometimes, but he just doesn't have much utility at all. Next up we got Gamorrean Guard, and Gamorrean Guard is boosted up to over C tier because of the Hutt Cartel rework. He's kind of tanky. He can work well as a 5th on a Jawa team, but at that point you already have Galactic Legend Jawa and you're mostly set anyway for that team. But he's very tanky, very thick, so you have to get through Chrysanthemum and then also Gamorrean Guard before you get to the attackers in Jawa. So that's why he merits getting up to C tier. Next up, we got Jawa Engineer, and it's hard to tell them apart, but this is the Jawa Engineer, and he's F tier because I don't like Jawas except for Scavenger. Everything they have goes through Scavenger. The only point in life for every other Jawa is just to get hit so they can get thermal detonators applied on the enemy through Scavenger. So, F for Jawa Engineer. Next up, we got Sunfact. Sunfact is high C tier. Probably could be B tier. I don't think he's that great on ground. He's a tank for the Geonosian team. Geonosian team doesn't have as much use now, but he does dispel on basic. He can taunt. He's pretty thick, and he's got a good ship. He's got a good tank ship, so maybe he could be higher. But right now, he's just top of C tier for me. Next up, we got Wedge Antilles. He's a pilot, but his ship isn't very useful. It doesn't deal a lot of damage. The best thing it does is come in reinforcements and inflict buff immunity, which can be helpful in some Executor counters to take out the Houndstooth when all else fails. So you can get the buff immunity and then start working away on Houndstooth. He used to be a decent lead with Biggs because they had a lot of synergy. They were kind of, I think they were called like bad boys or something because they were fighter pilots. But he doesn't deal a lot of damage. He just doesn't have a ton of use right now. So low D tier for him. Next up we got OG Echo, and he comes in for me at the top of the B tier. Mainly just because he's a 501st clone. He's on a great team. He assists a lot. He's a good damage dealer for the team, especially after 5s dies, or in Conquest if you have Zealous Ambition. He does a lot of damage with that grenade, and he stuns all droids, which is very helpful in territory battle. He is one of the weaker clones, so he wouldn't get like A tier like 5s or S tier like Rex, but he is pretty solid, so high B tier for him. Next up, we got B2 Battle Droid. And it's kind of surprising how early B2 came out in the game. This was about May of 2016. He came out a long time before the rest of the Separatist droids, other than Grievous. But he is just a great role player. Constantly getting turn meter just from your allies being hit is awesome. AoE Dispel and AoE buff immunity is very strong. He's one of the key components in that Grievous team. He makes them amazing in Conquest because they're getting to take a turn while the enemy is extremely fast. But he's just a key character. He's classified as a tank, so he is pretty tanky. But yeah, I like this character. High B tier. Next up, we got Dengar. In Dengar, I kind of wish he had a ship. I know he does have one in the Star Wars universe, but I think he'd go great with the Executor fleet. He's low B tier for me. I really like Dengar before we got Grief Karga and Mandalorian and Fennec Shand. He's kind of been pushed out of a bounty hunter team, but he's great under Bosk lead because he's basically a medic, throwing out all his thermal detonators, grenades, what have you, healing up the team almost to full health under that Bosk lead. He can stun. I think he can call allies to assist with his basic. There's a chance to. So low B tier for me. You know, he probably could go C tier, but I do like Dengar, so put him low B tier. Next up we got Zam Wessel, and Zam Wessel rises towards the top of the B tier only because of her GAC Omicron, and that GAC Omicron is amazing. The stat sharing is incredible. You're getting most of the time like a plus 60 speed boost or more. You're getting tons of offense from her. And she just makes that team one of the fastest teams in the game, over 400 speed sometimes. So yeah, she's amazing for that. Otherwise, her kit is very unremarkable. She passes out thermals, she inflicts evasion down, and her basic doesn't do much damage other than blowing up thermals on the enemy, which can do pretty well if you have a ton of thermals. Like back in Conquest when people were using that thermal detonator key card, her data disk, she could just blow one up after the other because she takes another turn after she blows up enough thermal detonators. Next up we got Geonosian Spy. Geonosian Spy is mid B tier for me. It's one of the better Geonosians. It's after GBA, it's probably the best. Just because that stacking damage can build up a big hit, which is like a pseudo annihilate. So awesome character as far as Geonosians go. The ship for Geonosian Spy is crucial as well. Crucial in a Geonosian fleet or in just countering the Executor. Being able to force a taunt on a random character that isn't taunting is what makes a lot of these counters work. So awesome character, awesome ship. Pretty great character, but on a team that's struggling right now. Next up we got Commander Cody, and Commander Cody falls, sadly, low D tier for me. Myself over here right now. I mean, he's a leader, but he's never used for his lead. The best thing he does is call Clone Trooper allies to assist. It deals 40% less damage though, so it's not as great as it could be, but he's just not used right now. He doesn't have a ship or anything, so he's not useful for that. He's basically never used unless people don't have Omega yet, and he can be the 5th in a Bad Batch team. I actually did this with him for a little bit since he's Relic 5 for JMK anyway. And it was decent. He called them all to assist. It was nice, but once you have Omega, there's no reason to use him. Next up, we got Chief Nemeth. And Chief Nemeth is top of F tier because he's the leader of the Jawas. Otherwise, he's a Jawa. So, not very good. You know, I don't have much to say about him. Just top of F tier for me. Next, we got the only Jawa worth anything. That's Jawa Scavenger. I put him lower B tier. I can't justify putting him at A tier. I think he's a little bit better than C tier, but I don't think he's high B tier just because he's very situational. He needs some. You need either really built up Jawas, which is 4 useless characters, in him, or you need them under Ray or something to build up thermal detonators. It's kind of annoying if they're on defense. You're just gonna take some damage. He's a good banish stealer, but he's the only one really worth much out of the Jawas. So lower B tier for me. Next up, we got Scarif Rebel Pathfinder at the bottom of C tier. He gets to the bottom of C tier because, I mean, up to that, because he has a decent ship, and Rogue One has new life under Admiral Raddus. Right now, I'm using him instead of K2 because I do think K2 would be better under Admiral Raddus. But I have Scarif built up because of his ship. I have that built up to counter Executor, him along with Piston. But he revives as long as he has a buff, so he can be kind of like a zombie. And he's good for Conquest because usually he's going to come back if he dies, and he's going to soak up some good damage for you. Next up, we got TIE Fighter Pilot, and I really like TIE Fighter Pilot. Mid B tier for him. He's lower. His ship is great. It's key in counting, Executor, and also Profundity with the Executrix. I think it's going to get better once Scythe comes out. But he's not that great on ground. He doesn't have as much of a use. He does have a Datacron right now where he's getting constant bonus turns, but it's kind of easy to get around it. He's not that much of a threat unless you're on offense. Offense under Palpatine, you could probably get a lot done, but I don't know. There's better uses for Palpatine with Martin Jade and such. But he's a decent character. I like him. He's up to the side because of his ship, though. Next up, we got Shore Trooper, and Shore Trooper is lower mid B tier as well. He's a great tank. He's up this high because he's a pre-taunt. He's a decent tank. He grants out turn meter to his Empire allies when they use special abilities. I think as long as he's taunting. But he's part of a ship too. It's not a very important ship, but I like Shore Trooper. He slots well into a Iden team, or he's just a good character to have as a pre-taunt with Vader or something else when you're trying to pull something off. So lower B tier for him. Alright, getting into some more Rogue One characters, we got Piston. He's just like Scarif Rebel Pathfinder, but I think he's not quite as good just because he doesn't revive, he's not a tank. He does have his Frenzy mechanic, which can help gain turn meter in one of those teams. He's not usually used on a Mon Mothma team, where that might come into play. He's not part of the turn meter train. I use him with Rogue One with Admiral Rash just because I have him R5 for the ships already. Or was he built up for one of these dudes built up for Profundity? I can't remember right now, but high D for tiered for him. He's not a good character, and his ship isn't as useful now because of Profundity. I didn't really use it. Maybe he could merit higher just because of the ship, but I don't know. Next up, we got Baze, and he's mid D tier. He's fallen a lot since he came out. Him and Chase were all the rage back in the 3+ Chase days is what I've heard it called. But he taunts, he can give retribution up, he can just sit there. He doesn't have a ship. Him and Chirrut together are kind of annoying with the cleansing and everything, but mid D tier, I've never actually made use of him. And the aforementioned buddy Chirrut, I put him lower just because he's not a tank. He's not taunting, taking care of fire, but he can cleanse and grant out a bunch of healing over time, so he doesn't merit F tier or anything. I think some people use him in Rogue One. I don't, because it's not worth it to me to build him up. So for me, low D tier, I could see you ranking him higher though. Next up, we got K2SO. K2SO is low B tier because he's a strong tank in the Rogue One team, counterattacking all the time. He's increasing his protection by like 1% every time he takes damage, which just sounds pretty negligible, but it could build up eventually. I don't know. It doesn't have a cap. But he's also part of the Cassian G-Wing, which is a decent ship. It's a decent reinforcement. It clears buffs and everything. So, low B tier for him. Next up, we got Jyn Urso. She's decent, mid B tier for me. She's got a ship too, which is decent, but she works well in a Rogue One team because she can't die until Admiral Raddus does. She grants turn meter to a teammate. She can revive a teammate, and she makes the team immune to buff immunity, so just decent character. Definitely want her for that Rogue One team. And last, but not quite least, we got Cassian Andor. And he's decent because he gives out a lot of debuffs. On his first special, he gives out a bunch, just set debuffs. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but it's pretty strong. And then on his second special, he can copy all debuffs on all other enemies to his target enemy, which is pretty good too. He's also obviously a pilot on Cassian Z-Wing, which is pretty nice with the Rebel fleet, clearing up debuffs, and even just a good plug-and-play reinforcement, because it's hard to come by a cleanse. It's basically that ship and Ebon Hawk, but decent ship, decent character, mid-B tier for him. So that's it. That's it for the standard release / marquee release series. I had a lot of fun doing it, going all the way back to 2015. 2016, 2017, 2018 had a lot of characters that made up the bulk of characters we have in the game, other than original characters. And kind of slow down after that, but I kind of like the pace the game's at now as far as character releases. But let me know what you think. How'd you enjoy the series? Do you want to see a day one character ranking? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Thanks for watching.